In this video, I'm going to talk about how to pick a turbo upgrade for your car with the B58 engine. There are a lot of options out there, and people have asked my opinion on which ones to get and how much power they'll make, and a lot of that depends. So I'm going to go into a little bit of detail for the ones that I know of and how I would rank them. So starting off, I've moved my intake out of the way so we can kind of look at the stock turbo and just make sure everybody understands how this works. So there are two halves. You have the intake side and the exhaust side. The intake side is where the air basically gets sucked in. It creates the boost as it spins, and then it spits it out towards the charge pipe, and that's what actually creates the boost pressure. Here you have the wastegate. It's all electronic. Everything is actually managed by the DME. You can see the wire plugged into it. So this actuator and everything is actually driven by this electronic wastegate. There are no vacuum lines or anything going to it. It's also oil cooled and water cooled. So you can see both lines going in there. And then this is the exhaust housing. So everything that you see that's tan is the exhaust housing. It is twin scroll. You can kind of see two different feeds. That's one and that's two. And each bank, basically, each bank of 3 cylinders gets fed in completely separately until it gets to the wheel. And that helps it spin faster and run more efficiently. So anytime you see twin power, it means that you have a twin scroll turbo, not that you have a twin turbo in our scenario. So let's talk about the different options. The first one is obviously staying stock. If you want to use a stock turbo, you can get upwards of 500 wheel horsepower with the proper fuel support. You know, you'll need E85, meth injection, something to make sure that the octane is up there, as well as a fuel pump to make sure you're flowing enough fuel. The downside is you're taking the stock turbo and trying to make it do something it's not designed to do. So running really high boost pressures on a small turbo can make power, but it's really inefficient. It generates a lot of heat. And in particular, our turbos tend not to like going over like 23 PSI. At that point, you're kind of on borrowed time. Some people have ran, 24, 25 PSI for a while, and they seem to have no issues, but it's not really recommended. So keeping it at like 21 to 22 pounds will make a lot of heat. It'll make a lot of power, but you want to make sure that your whole entire system is very robust because it's really running out of its efficiency range. So that's kind of like the limit of it, 500 wheel. If you're stuck with like pump gas, 91 to 93 octane, you can make like 400 to 420 with like a downpipe and everything optimized. And these are dyno jet numbers, by the way, before that argument starts. But that's about how much power you can expect out of the stock turbo. The next upgrade is basically taking this intake side and replacing it. So we have two options that have come up for that. We have the Pure Stage 1, and now we have the Vargas GC. And GC stands for Game Changer. And the way they changed the game is they made that extremely cheap. It's to the point where, people have all kinds of opinions about it, but for the price to value, you can't really ignore it. Like, you just have to try it. And that's why it's been selling a lot lately. A lot of people have run it this summer into the fall with really good results. And so it's pretty highly recommended just for the price to value point. The downside of it is it's basically the root of why a hybrid turbo is not ideal. So when you only replace the intake side, you're getting a bigger housing and you're getting an optimized blade, a bigger blade that can create more boost safely, but you're using the exact same exhaust housing and the same exhaust blade size. He does have a modified blade design, but the actual turbine size is the same. And that is just really inefficient. So it's kind of the same as making the stock turbo run in a way that it's not designed to, because it'll spool fast, it'll make a lot of boost, but on the exhaust side, you're still struggling to make power up top. It's just not as efficient as a properly designed turbo. It also requires a little bit of disassembly, so you're going to take the turbo off, and then you actually need to remove that V-band clamp and take the intake side off and then put the new one on, realign the wastegate, make sure it's clocked properly so it connects to the charge pipe. So it requires a little bit more work to actually get it assembled. But like I said, for the value, a lot of people don't really care. You can't really complain. Also with those, you can basically expect like 500 to 600 wheel horsepower Again, Dynojet figures. The 600 wheel horsepower is like really pushing it. You know, you've got a big fuel pump, a lot of boost. If you're stuck on 93 octane and, you know, just kind of moderate boost, then you'll probably be closer to like 450 to 500. The next upgrade is a full hybrid turbo replacement. So these actually replace the intake and the exhaust side. The options that we have for that right now are Pure 800, the Vargas GC Plus, and then there are a lot of suppliers in Europe that are starting to come out. I don't know all of them, but like Turbosystems is one that I'm starting to see people do their turbos. So there will be a lot out there. But if you want a hybrid turbo, that's a little bit better of a design because it's making sure that you actually have an exhaust wheel that matches the intake wheel a little bit better. For example, on the Pure, they'll take your stock turbo as a core, bore out the housing, and fit a bigger exhaust wheel on it. On the Vargas one, they actually cast a brand new manifold, so it fits like stock and looks like stock, but it has bigger ports in the manifold and obviously a bigger exhaust wheel. The benefits to this one is it is more efficient than just the intake side replacement. It also fits just like stock, so you can fit your downpipe, your intake, everything to it. If you stand back, you know, you put your intake on top, it's very discreet. If you have like emissions testing or you just kind of want a sleeper look, it fits that kind of profile nicely because it doesn't look like an obvious upgrade. And of course, they make pretty good power. They make upwards of like 700 to 800 wheel when you're really pushing it. A lot of people dial them in to like 600 to 650 just as like a safe range for the stock block. But, you know, time will tell if there's ways to make more power safely. Some people have ran 700 wheel for, you know, some time without any issues. So it just kind of depends. But the only downside is it is still a hybrid. So it's kind of like the stock turbo again. You're boring out the housing, which isn't ideal for some of them. And they got to like weld onto it and do other things to reinforce it. And it's still not quite like a properly matched turbo. You know, you're still bottlenecked by the actual exhaust manifold, or a lot of things in that scenario are still creating choke points, even though you're replacing both the intake wheel and the exhaust wheel. So the last option, and the one that I prefer, is a complete aftermarket replacement. So you'll have an aftermarket manifold, turbo, downpipe, charge pipes, everything custom around an aftermarket turbo offering. The three options that we have so far is Big Boost, that's been out for about 2 years. And they did a couple of revisions to their kits like a couple months ago, so they have new kits coming out. They also have the DOCRace kit, which again came out probably about 2 months ago, and people are starting to put it through its paces. And then we have a new offering from Spool, the fuel pump company. They are making a turbo kit as well. I really like this because it guarantees you're using a properly designed and vetted turbo. And a lot of times you can swap out the turbos for bigger ones if you want to in the future. These kits have a lot of power capacity. You know, you can make 1,000+ horsepower with these aftermarket turbos, depending on which ones you get. And you know it's going to be reliable just because of the brands. The primary downside is the cost. And obviously the assembly is much more difficult. So it doesn't just swap in like a stock turbo. You've got a separate manifold, separate turbo. It might have, you know, modified lines, modified intake stuff like adapters and stuff to make intakes fit. The Spool kit and the DOCRace kit are significantly different from the Big Boost one. On the Big Boost, you'll see it has like a cast manifold. It's a bottom mount turbo that comes with a master power turbo. It comes with its own catless downpipe and intake adapter to fit. Several aftermarket intakes, I won't say all or many, but I know several of them do fit with the inlet that comes with the Big Boost kit. That one obviously can make a lot of power. It spools very quickly. The only downside I would say to it is the installation is much more difficult. There are a lot of parts with it. Sometimes it comes with external wastegates that need a lot of time to be dialed in since it's not electronic like the stock configuration. So you'll need an external boost controller and other things to make that work. The DOCRace kit and the Spool kit are top mount kits. And that typically means that it spools a little bit later. On the Spool kit, it also has dual external wastegates. So it'll need to be proven. We'll see. it's probably going to be a little bit laggier, and it'll require, again, a lot of extra tuning for those external wastegates. Then finally, you have the DOCRace kit, which is also a top mount kit, but it's unique because it's actually designed to fit the OEM wastegate. So it has a bracket that matches this design, and you take the wastegate off and fit it onto the top mount kit, and it can run with a completely stock tune if you wanted it to. The downside to the spool kit and the DOCRace kit is being top mount. The turbo is like right here, so you don't have space to fit an intake. You don't have space to fit the MAF housing. Nobody's actually tried it yet, but it seems like there's no space to do that. So you've got to run it with basically just a filter. So not as ideal. Typically having a MAF is very beneficial with tuning, but it seems to work fine without it. So you just need a tune to compensate. So those are the three main options. Like I said, intake side replacement, full hybrid replacement, and then just a complete aftermarket turbo kit. So hopefully that answered everybody's questions. If you have any other questions or comments, feel free to leave them below, and I'll try to answer the best I can. Thanks.